Alrighty, so we already practiced together doing exercise 1 and 2, and this is just a quick review to help your paint mixing skills before we move to the color wheel. And I was also going to show you how to tone your paint. So when you're adding a shadow to your pieces, make sure that you have 2 cups of water, 1 clean, 1 dirty, and that you have a variety of brushes that are a little bit larger for paint mixing. And we're going to start with, when we talk, remember, value up here, the definition, value is the lightness. This will be on your final. To darkness in a painting, in a drawing, etc. And we talk about modifying hues. A hue is just a word for color. Oops, no brain again. Sorry, it's been a long day, no break. So, for example, if I was going to say this skeleton, the hue of this skeleton is magenta or violet. Okay? And then when we talk about tint, if you remember, we talked about any color plus white is tint. Also known as, does anybody remember what the term is for one color plus, any color plus white? Huh? Anybody? Remember when we painted the sphere? It's going to be on your final. I guess you're all going to fail, right? Monochromatic. Mono meaning one. That's why you want to take notes. Monochromatic means one color plus white. Toning is when we add, we're darkening a color. So we're supposed to be writing this down. Darkening a color by adding the complement or black and white, which is gray. And then shade is when we darken the color also, but we're only adding black. So it's a color plus black. Okay? Those are all terms that you have to know. So if this is the value scale, and if I'm going to be adding tone to my picture, I'm just adding black and white, which is going to increase. It's going to darken my saturation of the color. So this is what it looks like when I darken the saturation for red. So I'm adding black to my red, so it's getting darker. This is what we're going to do on this exercise. So if you went to the Art Institute or any MCC school, this is what their assignments are in color theory before they can do painting. So I've also taught at that school. So this is what I consolidated it for you, made it smaller. So this is red plus black to make it darker. And then this is red plus adding white to make it lighter. We don't use white, pure white in a painting ever. And we don't use pure black in a painting. We only use it to make the color lighter and darker in saturation. Full saturation is the color that the paint comes out of the tube. Okay? So this is what the full scale looks like. So adding black, adding white on that value scale. And so we're going to practice. And on your palette, you should have white. We're going to start with, we're doing the primary colors only, but this applies for all of the colors in the color wheel, because your first assignment is the color wheel. So you'll be doing this for every color. You're going to be mixing. So you're going to start with your white, and you want to get in the habit when you're working with in paint, you want to have multiple brushes so we keep our colors clean. Okay? So I have my red, and I have my white. And I'm going to take my paintbrush. And I'm going to dip it a tiny dot into the the red, and I'm going to then mix that tiny dot into my white, and I'm going to turn that white into a light red. And when we add white to red, it becomes pink. Somebody in here told me their middle school teacher taught them that pink was not red, and that is definitely not true. Pink is light red. Okay? When you're mixing your colors, you want to make sure you have enough paint. A lot of you are still struggling with using enough paint. You want to have paint inside your mixing well. You can, two different things. Take your brush and you push it up against the back side and you twist it and it lifts all the paint off and leaves the paint into your well. And if you want to load up your brush when you're going to paint, you scrape your brush on the edge and that gives you a nice big glob of paint. So we're going to add that up here to the tint. This is our lightest. Remember, we just wrote it down in our notes, hopefully. Remember, if you do a good job of taking notes, you can use them on your final and pass with flying colors. So after I get that first one painted in, I'm then going to go back to my red, and I'm going to dip my paintbrush and get another tiny dot. See how tiny that dot is? And I'm going to add it to my glob to increase the saturation. It's just making my red darker. And I'm going to just add this right below. If the colors are too close in value, the hues, then you need to add more red. So if you don't see a noticeable change in the hue right on those boxes, then it means you need to add a little bit more red. So that one's like borderline for me. I could add a little bit more. I'm going to add a little bit more. Start getting in the habit of trusting your intuition. If you even have to ask yourself, is that dark enough? Then just go ahead and add a little bit more. Just tweak it a little bit. There we go. That's better. So I see more of a noticeable jump. Not too much. Remember, we don't want to go too dark. We want it to be a subtle gradation in value, just like I showed you in the example here. So this is college level. So you see how many levels they're doing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 levels. We're only doing 1, 2, 3, 4. I've condensed everything for you. It's like fast food. Okay? Once we get that next section done, I'm going to go back and I'm going to dip my paintbrush again back into my red. And I'm going to darken my paint. And I'm going to add that to my next section. And you want to get in the habit of your paint should be smooth and creamy, like the consistency of yogurt, and you should only see the color. You shouldn't see through to the lines. You should only see the paint. That's what I'm grading for, to get the most possible points. If you can see through it, that means you're using too much water. If you notice, I haven't used water yet. You only need water to clean out your brush, and you should have at least 3 brushes at your table. And then the last one, I have too much white there, so I'm just gonna let it mix into this. So I'm gonna make it a little bit darker red. And I'm gonna paint my last wedge. So that's red plus the tinting. So I've got nice variety. For shade, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to be adding black to make it darker. And I want to make sure that when I'm adding my black, that I don't have any white in my brush. So hopefully you have another brush you can use, or you can clean off your brush. When you clean your brush off in water, remember to wipe off the water, because the water dilutes it. So you're going to start with your red. And we're going to paint the bottom square of that outside box red. That's red in full saturation. And we're going to go ahead and paint it over here for tone. So that's pure red, full saturation. Okay? So for the shade, I'm going to go back to my red, and just like my white, I'm going to dip my paintbrush into the black, and I'm going to mix it into my red, and it's going to turn my red darker, like a plum color, or blood, like fake blood. And I'm going to paint the next one. And then I'm going to go back to my black, and I'm going to add a little bit more black. So the black is slowly going to make it darker each time. Remember, your paint should be thick so I don't see through. And the last layer, I'm adding even more black, but I'm being careful that I'm not adding too much. I don't want it to look black. I want it to look like it's the darkest red possible. So it should look like a brick or like a stone color. There we go. So that's how you shade your color. So this is actually a full value scale, better than the one we just did the sphere. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's a full value scale in the U. And in the middle, we're going to do what's called adding tone. So to add tone to your color, to red, you can either add the complement, which is going to make it darker, warmer brown, similar to the black, or you're going to add the red and the white to that mixture. And we already have the darkest one here, so I'm going to put a dot of that white and red that I've already made on that side into my darkest mixture of the shade that I have right here. And I'm going to paint that in over here. So all it's doing is lightening it. It's called toning it, toning it down. So dulling it, I think it tends to sometimes look dirty, so I encourage you to use complements instead. But it's going to, and then I'm going to keep adding to make it lighter. I'm going to add more of that white and red mixture, and that's going to make it lighter. Remember to scoop up all the sides of the paint to help keep your mixtures even. I need to add a little bit more white, so the same color. That's why I always encourage you to go light to dark, because it's harder to go dark to light. There we go. So I added more white and red. It's getting lighter. And I'm just going to mix the rest into that mixture that I had. That's called toning it. And I'm going to put that right here. So those are the different variations you can get with your red. And then once you get done with the red, you're going to do the same thing with your blue in the middle, and then yellow is last. Yellow is the most difficult because yellow tends to look greenish, but you have to use a little bit more paint for that. Once you get done doing all three colors, you're practicing those three techniques: tinting to make it lighter in saturation, shading to make your hue darker in saturation, and toning. So if I wanted to make it darker for shadows. Then down here, you're going to sketch with pencil I got it. Thank you. You're going to sketch lightly with pencil, whatever composition you chose. I've been trying to do all three. This time I chose the gelato, which is ice cream. I don't know what flavor this is, but it looks really good. I love ice cream. I am an ice cream person. So let's lightly sketch it out. And I'm going to start using this. I'm using the same colors we did. We're going to practice. I already have my red in my palette, so I'm using the paint that I already have. And I'm trying to match the colors. So I have I lightened my hue up because I'm trying to match the color in the picture. And I also want to add highlight, so I can even, add a light red to that. And where there is shadow in my reds, I can add some darker shadows. So I'm going to get my red. So I put the base color, and now I'm going to start building my shadow. And instead of smoothing, I want to get the texture of the ice cream. So if you guys notice, I'm tapping, and it's helping me get that texture. And I'm using a combination of red, pure red at full saturation, as well as a red that has been, I used the toning exercise where I added black, a little bit of black to it, and white. So it gives me that darker color. So I'm getting this nice toning. You can see it's hard to see in the light, but maybe if I move this closer. There we go. See, I'm getting the shadow into my ice cream to match the picture. So I'm trying to imitate that shadow. Again, being really careful. I'm never using straight black in my painting. I'm only using that to make my paint darker. So if I want to increase that shadow there. And on the bottom of my ice cream scoop, there's some more shading. So I'm going to add those in. Because my ice cream has texture. It's not smooth. I'm trying to texturize it. And if I need to come back with some highlights, I can just add red and white together, and I can get that nice highlight. There we go. So you can see my ice cream scoop looks more realistic now with the shading. See that? There you go. The highlights, the shadows, so it looks more realistic. I started with the light shades, and I went back with my dark red, and I put the shadow. Once I get done with that, I'm going to move to the next color, which is blue. So that's why I said, try and paint as you're going when you have all the paint colors mixed, so you don't have to go back and remix everything. You're just going to do the same thing for each color. The next one is blue. So you're going to get white, and you're going to go through the same process, but with this time using white, starting with your white. And you're going to put a tiny dot of the blue into the white. And I have my light blue. I always save the yellow for the last because yellow is the hardest. And by that time you have so much practice that it ends up being easier because you have a better idea of how to use the paint. Okay? So if you notice, your goal as a painter is to try and get nice, smooth, even tone like this up here. Where you don't see through it, all you see is color. That's good craftsmanship. And once I get my light blue painted, I am going to slowly keep dipping my brush back into the blue and building it, darkening my hue. So I want to increase the saturation the same way I did the red. And I'm going to make sure that I'm scooping up all the paint on the top edges, mixing it together, checking to make sure that each of my levels are a nice transition. to dark blue. So same thing here. I have this blue. It's pretty nice. This looks like my ice cream, so I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to put in my blue for my blue ice cream scoop. All of the pictures are in primary colors. So the paint you're using on top, you can just use it on the bottom. I don't care if it's a little bit off in accuracy. I'm just looking for your ability to mix the paint. There we go. I got my blue scoop going. And now I'm going to transition to shading my blue. So first I'm going to take my blue paint and I'm going to paint the bottom. So that's blue in full saturation. And I'm going to scoop up some blue. And I'm going to add my black and start shading my blue. Make sure your blue is clean. It doesn't have any red in it. It will turn violet. So your first dark blue should look like a dark navy blue. And you just slowly keep increasing the black. The ratios. Keep increasing. And I'm going to do the same thing for my ice cream scoop that I did before. And I'm going to add texturize it and add the shading for my scoop with my dark blue. See, I'm putting that dark right over the light. And I'm just tapping it gently to give the texture of the ice cream. There we go. So I got my red and my blue on my ice cream. And then the final step, remember, is we want to add tone, which is white and black, to our blue. I overmixed the black the first time, so I'm actually going back in and correcting it. Just scraping it off with my finger because the paint is still wet. You can also do that with a sponge or a piece of towel. So I just wipe that off and I'm going to color correct it. There we go, that's better. Awesome. And the final step is my toning exercise. So I have my blue and black mixture, and I'm going to start adding my white to it. So I have my variety of brushes. I'm going to keep my white clean. I'm never dipping my dirty brush into my white. I have a separate white always. And now I have my black and blue mixture, and I'm going to slowly add white to it. Just a tiny amount first. That's going to be the darkest here. And I'm going to keep adding white to it so it gets lighter. Okay. And then the last one is the yellow. Like I said earlier, yellow is definitely the hardest to do. Yellow and white are the most transparent colors. So I'm going to go ahead and paint my yellow down first, where I know it's going to be needed. And my first get some new white. I'm going to take my yellow, just a tiny bit, into my white. I'm going to make the lightest tint of my yellow. So it should look like, the color of a piece of popcorn, but light, the lightest possible. That's going to be my tint on top. And it's also the color of my ice cream downstairs. So I'm going to go ahead and paint in my light yellow for my ice cream scoop. You can use that for a highlight too, but I'm going to do it the opposite way. I'm going to build up that light tone and put my dark yellow on top, imitating that texture. So I got my scoop coming together. Now I'm going to add some more yellow. So I'm going to start increasing that saturation. Being really careful. If you notice, I keep all my colors separated. I don't mix them together. If you mix your colors together, they get muddy. I'm going to put my darker value starting to come in. And I'm just going to keep increasing it. So I'm going to keep adding more yellow to that mixture so it's getting darker as it's moving down. It's just more subtle. If it looks too similar, you can keep adding a little bit more yellow each time. There we go. That's better. And I'm also going to add it down here. Do some of that texture. Now I want some ice cream. And I did miss my little bit of some red coming into that scoop. So I added that in there, back here. There we go. So it's looking more realistic already. And now I'm going to add a little bit more yellow for that last triangle. I accidentally got some blue in it. So hopefully you can't see. There we go. So see how it gets, it's really subtle, but it gets light to dark. And then I'm going to take my brush, and I want to make sure I have yellow with no white, because that's for the tone. So I'm taking some clean yellow, and I want to add black and make sure my black is also clean. And remember, yellow is a transparent color. So we're going to go very, very slow, and it's going to turn what I would consider like, you know, it doesn't look very pretty, but you see it's going to turn like a little green. And we're going to add that to the next level. So my yellow is getting a little bit darker. And I'm going to keep increasing the black into my yellow mixture. So it's not the most pleasant color, but you know, it's just pigment colors. And then I'm going to add more black to that mixture, and that's going to make it the darkest shade of yellow. And I can also use this mixture now. I'm going to start adding white and yellow, which I already have over here. So I'm going to mix the white and yellow into my dark mixture, and I'm starting to tone it. So it's going to look similar in color, but a little bit lighter brown. Not so much green. Remember, don't hand these in to me wet. Just put them in the drying racks when you're done, and you can hand them in to me later, because they will stick to each other and get everywhere. So that's how you do the toning exercises. For my ice cream scoop, I can also use, I need some darker tones for my yellow. I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to start tapping, get that texture for my ice cream. we go. What do you think? So I got my ice cream. Looks pretty close. The texture on top. And the value. I'll hang those up. But that's how you that's how we paint. So that's what all the values that you're mixing are what you're going to use for your painting. I'll put this up here for you so you can see. And it's recorded. Well, I'll upload it, but that's exactly what you want to do for your painting. When you get done, you're going to clean out your palette.